You're listening to Owning the Buy Box, an IPSecure podcast. This is the podcast for agencies and brands who want to master Amazon, push out unauthorized competition, and take their business to the next level. You're about to hear a conversation that'll help you maximize your growth on Amazon by owning the Buy Box. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to another edition of Owning the Buy Box. I am your host, Dave Cooper. I'm also the CEO and the founder of IPSecure. Really excited today. We have a great guest with us. You know, we started the show several years ago primarily because we just had this really strong belief that, you know, e-commerce performance was significantly impacted by brand protection, and brand protection really wasn't considered part of, you know, the e-com stack and the solutions required to be successful. And so having our guest today is really exciting because he comes from a world where I think, you know, those two things are absolutely converging. Our guest today is Paolo Ascoli, and he is the Director of Ecommerce for Corsearch. And Paolo, welcome. Thanks for being here. We really appreciate it.
Hi, Dave. Thanks so much for having me. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here in your podcast to be able to share and give you hopefully some useful insights on my experience in this field. I really look forward to our conversation. Yeah,
same here. Thank you for the time. I know you're a busy guy, and where are you based right now, Paolo?
I have been based in the Netherlands, Amsterdam, for the past 7 years. Basically, since the day I moved to the Netherlands to, in fact, embark in this beautiful journey, career journey that is, in fact, the brand protection journey that has been at least where many of us started. Back in 2018, I came from a background of intellectual property. I was a lawyer in Italy, originally a tax lawyer, but then I saw the light and moved towards what I thought was, you know, the future for me, indeed, intellectual property. But after a couple of years of, let's say, local legal experience, I realized that just being a lawyer wasn't for me. And so I started looking elsewhere, and I found this fantastic industry. And I've never left that since.
Yeah. That's kind of an interesting story. I have several, you know, friends of mine in college. They went on to law school and became, you know, tax attorneys, or they became other types of legal professionals. And then years later called me up and they were like, we hate our jobs. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I get your point, right? You're passionate about these issues, but you needed to kind of point that passion in a different direction, I guess. Yeah, and I asked because Corsearch is obviously a very global business. In my previous life with Mark Monitor, you know, we were, of course, quite familiar, you know, with Corsearch as a competitor in this space and a significant provider of a lot of different solutions. And so, you being in Amsterdam makes quite a bit of sense considering how global the business is. And I think your perspective in particular is super interesting for our listeners.
The reality is that now brand protection, as in my opinion, also e-commerce work, has become a cost of business. In my opinion, the number of clients will not reduce, but indeed will increase as the issues obviously start touching, you know, smaller brands as they expand and as they get more traction in the market and consumers start finding them more attractive. So, you know, hopefully we look forward to even many more opportunities in the future.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to the next question, which is, you know, you've been around long enough, right, to see. Well, actually, and your timing was sort of really interesting because it was like pre-COVID, and then you kind of went through COVID, right? And now you're on the other side of it. Does anything jump out at you in terms of, hey, when I first started, this is kind of how it was. This is what brands were really cared about. And today, this is what they care about. And are those things different? and I realize there's probably tons of them, but if one of them jumps out at you that you could share, that would be great.
I was about to say tons of things. I can give a quick answer, meaning that what brands obviously started caring a little bit more, and this is a little bit obviously the core of my career evolution in this company, is indeed what we refer to with gray trade. Gray trade is a space that has always existed. It has always existed in the offline scene, and it has always existed in the online scene as well. Truth is that with the offline scene, you obviously have challenges that are dictated by the physical requirements to open a shop and sell branded products. You have to get those products from somewhere. When it comes down to the online scene, mostly in the past 5 years, opening a store and finding through online distributors product that you can sell and effectively diverge from the official brand's channels has become child's play. So I would say that probably, and we spoke about this together already, but probably the biggest change or shift that I noticed in my transition through COVID is that you start seeing an evolution of the consumer from a mere consumer to actually a user of the online marketplace scene in becoming a seller themselves. Again, it has become so easy to open an online store and start selling products. Amazon, amongst many, have facilitated that in an impressive way, that it has almost become a core part of that side hustle culture that today we hear so much about. That, to a certain extent, it's absolutely legit and reasonable, right? But it does get to a point where it starts stumbling and it starts touching on areas that are deemed to be borderline illicit, and if not borderline illicit, definitely ranging in the unauthorized world that has consequences on brand reputation, on brand dilution, interferences with consumer or product safety, revenue loss for the brands ultimately, reports for consumers, because maybe you receive a product that is broken and you do not have a warranty, and you don't reply anymore because the seller is some bloke from his garage trying to make a buck or two. So I would say that evolution from mere consumer, to seller, so to user as in user of the online marketplace, has been the biggest change, in my opinion, biggest driver for this.
That's a super interesting point. The COVID just created this environment which really accelerated the e-commerce growth, or not even just the growth, but like the ability for a consumer to transition into a merchant, right? And the barrier of entry is almost sort of nothing. Although it's kind of interesting because when you meet with marketplace platforms and you talk about brand protection and you talk about counterfeiting, right? They'll tell you, well, we've made it much more difficult for these bad guys to, create seller accounts and get on the platform. Is that not your view, that it's getting more difficult for sellers? You sound like it's getting easier.
I was about to say it's gotten more difficult for us to actually enforce rather than for the sellers to post product. Look, I believe that here we enter a very fun world, in my opinion, fun world of politics and lobbying that I enjoy thoroughly working in, because it feels like a chess match. Platforms will say that their efforts are obviously never been stronger in that field, and to a certain extent you can justify that by increased numbers of employees, for instance, better structures in place, better processes, right? I would argue that indeed, maybe I was talking with a colleague today, and I was reflecting on the fact that 7 years ago, enforcing on intellectual property violations on Amazon was very easy, was quite frankly easy. Today, Amazon has become, quite frankly, a maze of authorizations, double authorizations, pushbacks, sellers having appeal times. So the world, from the marketplace perspective, has evolved. In my opinion, because I live the side of the agent and the representative of our clients, not in a more favorable way for us necessarily. While instead for sellers that have the intent of engaging in, illicit activities on the platform, it hasn't become more complex. I can give a fair, quick example. We find tens of these every day when looking at Amazon offers, like seller locations being identified as, addresses that, if you search on the internet, correspond to like a Zillow advertisement for a house in some random area, right? And you find it as the address of the seller located, in the US, while in fact it's an overseas seller trying to, diverge product, or in fact sell counterfeit product and, dilute that consumer experience through, commingling, of Amazon stock.
Yeah, I think as the reporting requirements haven't, I feel like at least in the US and actually Europe was way ahead in this regard, but forcing marketplace platforms, right, to collect more information from sellers, and they're doing that, right? 5 years ago, addresses, at least in the US, for marketplace sellers on Amazon were not public, right? Were not published. Thank you for listening to this episode of Owning the Buy Box. Be sure to listen to part 2, available on your favorite podcast player.
You've been listening to Owning the Buy Box, a show from IPSecure. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast player. Please give us a rating, leave a comment, and share episodes that you love. That helps us keep delivering you the tools you need to sharpen your competitive edge and ensure your authorized sellers always own the buy box. We'll see you next time.